Story 1. I do not know. Send a text like, "Did you hear? Crazy stuff." And then move on with my life trying to feed and shelter myself. Story 2. Any more Schadenfreude, and I am going to need a cigarette. Story 3. Absolute shock that the judicial system actually functioned. Story 4. I'm going to write him in jail at least once a month and sign it Hillary Rodham Clinton. Story 5. I would be thankful to finally stop hearing about Donald Trump, at least after the initial month or two when the news agencies report about his prison food and bowel movements to try to extract every detail. Story 6. Shock and disbelief because it will never happen. Between appeals and his age and poor health, he will be dead long before he sees the inside of a prison. If he were somehow able to live that long, it would be house arrest at best. In reality, he would flee the country long before it reached this stage. Story 7. Pour a nice whiskey, sit by the fire, and start dreaming about the future again. Story 8. Shocked, because every one of us knows it will never truly happen. Story 9. I would be shocked and relieved. Project 2025 is very frightening. Story 10. First pump and then move on with my life. He is a criminal who should be handled accordingly, and justice should be served. Story 11. I have a bottle of very expensive cognac from a distillery in France owned by a distant relative. It is marketed under the family name, which is my surname. I was gifted it on my wedding day by my wife. I opened it the day after my cancer went into remission. I only consume from the bottle on occasions of significance. When Donald Trump goes to jail, I shall drink from it again. Story 12. Relief. There is not a lot of rule of law left, and equal justice under the law is required for civil society. Story 13. Already made a pact with a friend to open a bottle of champagne and toast to that person going to jail. Story 14. I would be happy, personally, mostly because of the mere idea of Project 2025 ever happening. Some people actually support it. Story 15. Grab a bag of popcorn and watch social media implode and Fox News hosts' heads explode. Story 16. I would be most excited to see the mugshot of him after he is denied access to 3 cans of hairspray per day. Imagine his head and face with 43 strands of 18-inch hair sadly descending from his scalp. Glorious. Story 17. Oh no. Anyway, actually, I would be happy not to hear about his nonsense 3 or 4 times a day. Story 18. I'd feel an overwhelming sense of relief. I don't know whether it would be the kind of calm relief that just washes over you in a quiet wave or the kind where you shout your joy out the window to the entire neighborhood and pop open a bottle of something bubbly, like sparkling juice. With me, I suppose it would depend on the day. But I know I would feel relief. I'm a native New Yorker, so my dislike of this orange thug goes back way beyond 2016. I've put up with this preening peacock in the local news since the early 1980s. I also, as a black American, have not forgotten how he hounded the Central Park Five over that rape. Just because they were young and of color and didn't come from families with money. What makes me even more outraged is that he never apologized for the way he acted when they were exonerated. I have no tolerance for a man who is not able to admit his mistakes. I'm also disgusted with how he's deceived many of my fellow Christians. Even if I hadn't grown up knowing about him and hearing him, I would never vote for a man who has been married 3 times and cheated on every single one of his wives. I know that a lot of my brothers and sisters in Christ say that he's running for president, not pastor, but it speaks to character, or in his case, the lack thereof. A person who thinks the rules don't apply to him won't hesitate to break any and all boundaries. And that's exactly what happened. Exhibit A, January 6th. As my mother used to say, he's got old and new wrongdoings to be held accountable for. So I'd be delighted if he were given a prison sentence. Delighted. In all honesty, though, he wouldn't be sent to a regular prison facility. That would be far too unwieldy. Even a corrupt, convicted felon ex-president is still entitled to United States Secret Service protection. And it wouldn't be fair to make the agents on his detail essentially have to go to prison, too. I think they would put him in some kind of home confinement, perhaps with an ankle monitor or something. So, unfortunately, he wouldn't be in a small cell with only a narrow bed, a metal desk, and a toilet. Mar-a-Lago isn't a place that suits my particular taste. I think it's garish. but it's a much better environment than a regular prison. He'll still have the comforts of home. My main desire is that the court stipulates that Trump can't access the internet in any way for the duration of his sentence. That would really upset him, and I'm here for it. Story 19. Laugh a lot. Like a lot. A lot. Then go to Twitter to watch the supporters of Donald Trump lose their minds and laugh some more. Story 20. Delight. But I would like to know why Jared Kushner and Ivanka are not also on trial. Surely selling United States nuclear secrets for $2 billion to the nation's enemies and helping to compromise national security is also worth a couple of life sentences. Story 21. I will celebrate when he is underground. Until then, I need to just survive. Story 22. I just want to see that piece of human filth in prison orange with no hair and makeup. But to answer the question, I would openly weep. Story 23. I am not even American, and I would be thrilled. That man is a blight on his country. Story 24. I would expect a few events that we would consider domestic terrorism. I would be very careful about the larger gatherings I attended. Those who have been influenced by this man have tunnel vision. These people believe a terrible injustice has been committed. Story 25. Break open the good stuff and have a giant session of, I told you so. Story 26. My dad went to prison for many years during my childhood for driving drunk 3 times, which is a felony. It destroyed my family. Our justice system is extremely cruel and uncompromising, and people's lives are ruined for very small things. Donald Trump is facing 34 felony charges. If he does not go to prison for any of them, there are things I would like to say that I cannot because I do not want to end up on a list. Story 27. He is a terrible human being. I am thankful for justice. I hope the person faces consequences and recovers. You asked. Story 28. Rejoice. The number of crimes he has committed and avoided accountability for is countless. Story 29. From this side of the Atlantic, there is mild gladness that America is not dead yet, followed by concern about what Donald Trump supporters will do in response. Story 30. Go ice skating in Hades because that is more likely, unfortunately. Story 31. The day Donald Trump goes to jail, I will use 8 hours of paid time off to make sure I do not miss a moment. I will be watching the news all day, preparing delicious food, sharing some drinks, and genuinely enjoying watching a former president being imprisoned for the first time. Story 32. Think, interesting. And then just go about my day because chances are my life will not be affected by his incarceration in the slightest. Story 33. I would laugh heartily and say, good riddance. Justice was finally served to this evil and hateful man. It would be a true spectacle as he arrives at the prison and is escorted inside, reminiscent of the moments after Theodore Bundy was executed. People celebrating in the streets and outside the prison, chanting with excitement. That would be such a beautiful sight. Story 34. I have a bottle of North Korean brandy I bought about 15 years ago when I visited the demilitarized zone. I have always said I am waiting for the reunification of the 2 Koreas before I open it to celebrate. I do not think I will see that in my lifetime, so maybe former President Donald Trump languishing in prison is a good runner-up celebration. Story 35. I am not American, but it would be good to have confirmation that United States politicians are not above the law. Story 36. Be hopeful that it will set a precedent that the super rich are not immune to the law and that the justice system cannot be paid off anymore. Story 37. I would be annoyed that justice took so long to run its course but thankful that it finally did. Story 38. Shrug and carry on with my day while thinking that they finally did something right. Story 39. I guess the law does apply to everyone. Then go work. Story 40. I would probably just think, good, finally, and then move on with my life. I believe imprisoning Donald Trump is less important than establishing the precedent that United States presidents are not immune to consequences for their actions. People are sent to jail for years for shoplifting food to avoid starvation, smoking marijuana, or other relatively minor offenses. White-collar criminals often receive minimal punishment, if any, for crimes involving far greater amounts of money than most people could imagine. This is unfair. Donald Trump has committed numerous crimes, and those with the authority to incarcerate him need to take action. Story 41. I would be shocked that the United States justice system actually did something right. Story 42. I live in Missouri, put my feet up, open a cold beverage, and watch the Republican leaders react strongly. Story 43. The fact that this man has 91 indictments, several trials scheduled, and numerous past indiscretions, yet 70 million people still want him as president, absolutely terrifies me. Story 44. On one hand, it would make me more confident in our justice system, showing that he is not getting off easy just because he is powerful. On the other hand, it would likely make him a martyr. So, mixed feelings. Story 45. It would be some crazy 2016 Chicago Cubs win sort of partying. Champagne spraying. Story 46. Got excited by some of the comments written as if something had happened. Story 47. Open up a nice bottle of Veuve Clicquot and enjoy the day. Story 48. Ha 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 ha. Breathes ha 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 ha. Story 49. As a non-American, I would only feel like it is about time and not care much beyond that. Story 50. As a non-American, I honestly wonder why it took so long and how he was allowed to run in the first place. Story 51. I would feel sorry for the United States Secret Service detail that still had to guard him. Story 52. Take the day off work and drink during the day with my aunt in celebration. Story 53. I would go on a spit in the face of every Make America Great Again individual tour. Story 54. I would talk about it for a week and enjoy the flood of, oh my God, videos that come out because of it, then move on because ultimately nothing changes. Story 55. When he dies, champagne and a day off work to celebrate. Prison, champagne and a day off work to celebrate. Story 56. I will be reminded of Jim Carrey's skit as Joe Biden on Saturday Night Live. I think we all needed a break. Isn't that satisfying? Just not to hear his voice for a single goddamn second. Story 57. I will be running down the street banging pots and pans. The party is at my house. Story 58. Too little, too late. The leader might be in prison, but we still have many of his followers. These followers were not created by him, but are the result of a long list of issues that the United States needs to fix as soon as possible before someone smarter than Donald Trump comes along and repeats this behavior. Story 59. I haven't smoked in years, but a cigar and perhaps a nice bottle of champagne, some upbeat music, and maybe call a few friends to join me. Story 60. Incredibly smug, just rubbing it in constantly to the people who I know still support him. Story 61. Go to work and do my normal daily activities. Donald Trump's illegal activities and subsequent punishment will not impact my everyday life. However, if he is found guilty, which seems likely based on the court proceedings, and then let off, it will affect my life because no one will have any reason to follow the law anymore. This is what dictator Donald Trump is seeking. He wants to become the law. Story 62. At home, I would laugh loudly. Out in the world, I would keep my mouth shut. I live in an area overrun with supporters of Make America Great Again, many of whom carry concealed weapons even though they did not pass the background checks or did not try to get a permit because they will not let the government tell them what they can and cannot do. Story 63. As the first time in recent history, a wealthy racist individual was held accountable for his numerous crimes, including an attempted insurrection after losing an election, I would be acceptable with that. Story 64. Big exhale, fist pump, loud yes, and then hope we never hear from or about him again. Story 65. Although it is true I would likely break down with a giddy sense of ecstatic joy, it would not be without a gnawing itch of worry. I have always felt that the forces of barely suppressed darkness the man unleashed, and it is here where I differ with many on Reddit and in society generally regarding the true extent of danger the man represents to America, because while he may be a buffoon, the fiery whirlwind of evil, for lack of a more encapsulating word, and hatred that have given the man both a cause and a birth within the halls of American power are in no way different from the whirlwinds which mankind observed in horror as they devoured the decency, morality, and mercy of the German people in World War II. in the Bosnian Serb army during the genocide of Srebrenica in the mid-1990s, and in many other 20th century examples where bloodlust reigned and where horror and previously unimaginable terror became all too real. Donald Trump is an idiot. True. His supporters, however, likely own a massively dominant share of the firearms in America. I will never stop believing the man is a profound threat to the Constitution, continuity, and basic civil rights in American democracy. Indeed, to democracy itself. Full stop. Everybody seems to think Adolf Hitler was some kind of genius. Well, I have studied the rise of fascism in Germany for 25 years. I can tell you the man was not smart. What set him apart, however, was his passionate sense of grievance, betrayal by those previously in power, and anger at those he perceived as a threat to traditional Germanic people that looked like him. I should also mention that he was good at whipping up crowds who thought like him. Sound like anyone you can think of in politics today? The hush money trial, I am afraid, is a sideshow. Believe you me, however, I pray it hurts him somehow. I just do not think it will. Adolf Hitler went to jail too. Story 66. With some concern because his unstable followers would likely try to start a civil war. Story 67. Not a huge fan of Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., but Donald John Trump needs to be in prison for a few years and stay there. However, I know that will never happen, not in any country in the world, let alone the United States of America. Story 68. As an Australian, I would be happy. He is a despicable person. Story 69. Tears of joy. It would mean that some form of rule of law still exists. But sadly, I do not think it will happen. Too many people blindly follow an obese wannabe dictator with a story of bankruptcies. Desperation. Story 70. Marvel at the flying monkeys flying out of my posterior, as it is not something that will ever happen. Story 71. Shock, to be honest. He definitely deserves to go to jail, but he has somehow managed to avoid consequences his whole life, so I fully expect him to do the same here as well. Story 72. Wow, so these people really did put their hearts and souls into one thing, and it did end up happening. If those individuals wanted to see Donald Trump go to jail and it came true against all odds, they worked toward that goal. Then I have no excuse anymore to not make my own dreams come true. Story 73. It would be nice to see the justice system working, but the feeling would be tainted by knowing that even Adolf Hitler spent time in prison. Story 74. Laugh and then stop as I realize he will still end up being the grand old party nominee upon his release. Story 75. How would I react if Santa Claus were real? This milkshake is too cold. I cannot think. Story 76. I absolutely would not be surprised if he has to serve jail time by the end of the trial, probably by violating his gag order repeatedly. I would not be surprised if he is found guilty either, but I would be surprised if he ends up serving a significant jail sentence for any of the crimes he is on trial for. More likely, he will be fined and possibly placed on probation. However, over the next few years, he might have to pay so much in settlements that it actually hurts him. Story 77. I would probably party hard and call in to work the next day saying I was feeling too good to come in. I might actually take the whole week off and spend it making memes to mock Donald Trump. Story 78. I would actually have a little hope that the system is salvageable. Someone who is wealthy got what they truly deserved and did not pay their way out of it. Even the 10 contempt counts before anything happened is insane. Story 79. I would throw a party and you are all invited. Unless you are a supporter of Donald Trump, then have fun crying and whining. Story 80. Fist pumps, high fives, punching the air. That sort of general celebratory action. Story 81. Buy myself a bottle of Hendrick's gin as a treat and celebrate. Story 82. Dancing in the streets. And I am not even American. Story 83. Enjoy the memes and all the nonsense that follows. Story 84. I would say, cool. Now can we get all the other dozens of people who are openly just as bad or worse? Story 85. Celebrate the American justice system and its people for doing the right thing. Story 86. Justice prevails. The wealthy should be subject to the same laws as everyone else. Story 87. Happiness is not found in incarceration but in demonstrating that all are truly equal before the law. I lost something very precious to me due to an illegal act by a corporation. I successfully made it to court but could not afford the legal fees to continue the trial. The corporation got away with flagrantly violating the law, as some of their own internal documents included their in-house legal team listing the criminal acts, because they had more money and were more powerful than me. People like Donald Trump should be just as vulnerable to prosecution as any other person living under the same judicial system. Story 88. We have an overly optimistic bottle of champagne marked for the occasion. I guess I will pop that, remember that I don't really like champagne, and pour something much stronger to celebrate. I will also likely be following the Pod Save America feed to get their input. Story 89. Hope there is someone behind bars looking for an elderly girlfriend with flatulence and the inability to tell the truth. I hope they will be very happy together. Story 90. I pretend that the orange cheddar cheese Doritos truck is the Emperor and I am Rey Skywalker. Pew, pow. Enjoy this lightning, your handmaid's tale. Story 91. That older man from Florida is as nourishing to the intellect as showing a picture of oxygen to a drowning person. Story 92. The man who knew how bad COVID-19 was knowingly killed thousands of Americans. To get any aid, you had to grovel and comply with him. He knowingly created colleges that were just cash grabs and displaced creators from their intended places. Even his own mother said he had no place being president. He was a draft dodger and called captured soldiers losers. He said Mexicans were going to pay for the border wall while not paying the businesses for the slates he ordered. He constantly fell asleep during his own trials only to later ask for money. He repeatedly made inappropriate comments about his daughter and told a porn actress that the reason he was attracted to her was because she looked like his daughter. I feel like I have left out 20 years, but it seems this has been a long time coming. Story 93. Hallelujah. If I had done even a fraction of the crimes he has been convicted of, I would have already been in prison a long time ago. Why should he be able to avoid prison? Aren't we all equal in the eyes of the law? I hear Bubba targets the wealthy inmates. Story 94. I would say good, and hopefully never talk about or hear from him again. Story 95. Probably the old man and I will go down to the pub for a meal and a beer to celebrate a job well done. It is a small victory, certainly not the end of Donald Trump or Make America Great Again, but a win nonetheless. Story 96. Just wait for him to write a book and pray he does not title it something like My Struggle. Story 97. I would actually be surprised. You mean the lying, thieving, cheating, cowardly, draft-dodging grifter has finally been treated to some justice? Well, I did not expect that. Story 98. Maybe a cake? Two-layered cake? Perhaps something more understated followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, original version without the phrase under God. I don't know if candles are overkill or not. I'm thinking bicentennial jingoism. Story 99. Short-term relief is followed by concern about what cultist retaliations will occur, but ultimately they will just find someone else like him to lead the cult when he is no longer around. He is the symptom of a bigger problem. Story 100. Inquire about the availability of the Assange suite at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Want to book it before Donald Trump can. Story 101. As long as the reasons are legal and just, that is all fine by me. From the crimes he has been tried for, he should certainly face some prison time. Story 102. Spontaneous ejaculation and a smile that may never go away. Story 103. What is the most expensive bottle of champagne I can afford? I would open it. Story 104. Probably say something like, he will probably get out for some bad reason. Then move on. He doesn't care about me. Why should I care about him? Story 105. I would be very shocked, but I would be celebrating. Prison is for poor people and we all know it. Story 106. I would be puzzled as to why they would stop there. We have many other politicians who should be incarcerated together. Story 107. I would be happy, but shocked. In the United States, celebrities do not get held accountable, especially not racist, transphobic, classist, homophobic, xenophobic, sexist celebrities. I do not think he is going to jail. The fact he is running for president is a disgrace and honestly makes our country look awful to others. Story 108. I would be happy to have a different candidate as the front runner for the Republican Party for the next election, and I would be happy if he were not in the news as much. Story 109. I have to admit, I might be a complete jerk and remind a lot of people who spoke badly about anyone who was not Donald Trump. Story 110. Prepare for when all the right-wing extremist terrorists emerge and start violent attacks. They will be stopped, but not before causing unnecessary bloodshed. Story 111. I live in Canada. I would probably find out days later and think, oh no, but the Vancouver Canucks are in the playoffs, so it is okay. Story 112. Oh no. Anyway, yes, let's send Ukraine some more artillery shells. Story 113. I would laugh very hard. He is an annoying old person. Story 114. Laugh my ass off and hope it ensures that there is no second term for him. Story 115. He would just go to that minimum security gated community that only the really rich men and women go to. Story 116. It will be a small affair with only 30 or 40 guests, an open bar, and a barbecue. It will start during the day and continue until all the guests and crashers have shared their happiness to their satisfaction. Story 117. I would still be concerned that the grand old party intends to make him president from prison. Story 118. I would be relieved, but it would never erase my disappointment in my fellow citizens who have supported him. Story 119. I would react by saying it is quite unusual for something normal to happen. Story 120. I would say, yes, that sounds about right, and then continue with my day. Story 121. Dear, I just want the Oompa Loompa and the Red Minions to relax already. I do not need to hear his opinion on everything or what color his stool was this morning. Story 122. Annoyed because it is all nonsense and frustrating. 8 years of trials. Story 123. I would pray a lot, like for several weeks, that he drops his soap in the shower. Story 124. Probably celebrate knowing a criminal and toxic politician finally got what he deserved. Story 125. I would send thoughts and prayers to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Story 126. I would get a bottle of wine and savor it while frequently refreshing the online news feed. Story 127. I would be amazed that the justice system actually works even for wealthy individuals. Story 128. Pray he gets attacked in the general population. A European who has no political stake at all but just wants to see the former president gone before the world deteriorates. Story 129. Dance a jig. Celebrate that the rule of law remains intact and our country will not become a despot. Story 130. I would be shocked. But if something were going to happen to him, it would have happened a long time ago, so I do not get my hopes up. Story 131. I would laugh and wonder what fantasy land I woke up in where wealthy individuals would actually be held accountable for their actions. Story 132. I would be shocked, to be honest. He seems to have a way of avoiding responsibility. Once the shock wore off, I would probably rediscover some of the pride that people used to have. Story 133. Not one Daddy Yankee fan in this entire feed. That seems strange to me. Note: I am not a fan myself, just making an observation based on statistical reports of supporters. Story 134. At this point, I am so over even hearing about Donald Trump. I would only welcome the silence. Story 135. Do the same as everyone else? Hope it does not end in riots. Then clock in for work because the bills do not pay themselves. Story 136. 1. Feel glad that the system works, although it is too slow. 2. Relieved that the mess is mostly behind us. 3. Kind of sad that our electorate elected this person to become president, and as a result we had to jail one. Story 137. I would tell him I am happy with our wonderful ice cream overlord, Joe Biden. Story 138. We should make it an international day of celebration. Justice Day or Anti-Orange Day, something like that. Story 139. I would be shocked because it would mean the world is not as corrupt as I thought it was. But let's be real, we are watching the slow decline of Western democracy in real time. It is the end of the line. He will be found guilty of some of the minor offenses, will be let off for the major ones, will not serve time in prison, will be allowed to run for office, and he will win the next election. Strap in, it is going to be one hell of a ride. I wonder what he will do for his friend Vladimir Putin. Russia indirectly funds Iran and Palestine to help destabilize the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, but Israel is an American ally. I wonder what the big orange megalomaniacal loudmouth will do this time. Story 140. As a British person, in theory this has no effect on me, but in reality, relief for friends, especially those who are minorities living in the United States, would be a great thing to feel. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.